You never really think that life can flip upside down in a matter of moments. When you are 20, you feel like you have all the time in the world, like you are invincible. But sometimes, it just takes one encounter to make you realize that life has a way of surprising you, shaking you to the core, and making you question everything. I was not looking for anything serious that summer. I had just landed a job at a local gym, working as a lifeguard and part-time swim instructor. The job was easy enough, keeping an eye on swimmers, making sure everyone stayed safe, and occasionally teaching kids how to swim. It was a pretty laid-back gig, perfect for a 20-year-old guy looking to make some money before college kicked off again in the fall. The gym was nothing fancy, just your typical suburban place with an Olympic-sized pool, a couple of basketball courts, and the usual fitness equipment. Most of the people who came through were regulars, middle-aged folks trying to keep in shape, parents with kids, teenagers like me getting in their daily workout. It was all pretty mundane, but then there was Rebecca. The first time I noticed her, I was cleaning up around the pool after my shift. She was doing laps, cutting through the water with a kind of effortless grace that immediately caught my attention. Rebecca was older, much older. I would later find out she was 58. But she carried herself in a way that made her seem younger. She had this incredible presence, like she was completely in control of everything around her. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was tied back in a sleek ponytail, and even from a distance, I could tell she was beautiful. Not in the way most 20-year-olds would talk about, but in this mature, confident way that made her stand out from everyone else at the gym. I found myself watching her whenever I could, mesmerized by the way she moved in the water, smooth, powerful, completely in her element. For weeks, I just watched, never thinking she would notice me. After all, I was just the young lifeguard, barely out of high school, and she was this stunning older woman who probably had her life figured out. I could not imagine what someone like her would see in me, but then one day, she did notice. It was a quiet evening at the pool, the kind where there were only a handful of swimmers and I was getting ready to close up. Rebecca was the last person in the water, finishing her laps. I was watching her, like I always did, trying not to be too obvious about it, when she climbed out of the pool, water cascading down her toned body. She grabbed a towel and started drying off, her eyes scanning the nearly empty pool deck, and then she caught my gaze. For a moment, I froze, feeling like I had been caught doing something I should not have. But instead of looking away, she smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made my heart race. She walked over to where I was standing, her towel wrapped loosely around her shoulders. "Hey," she said, her voice smooth and warm. "You are the new lifeguard, right?" "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound casual, even though my stomach was doing flips. "That's me?" She nodded, her eyes locking onto mine in a way that made it hard to breathe. "I have seen you around. You are pretty good in the water yourself." I blinked, surprised that she had noticed me at all, let alone my swimming. "Thanks," I said, feeling a flush creep up my neck. "I try to stay in shape." "You should be proud of it," she said, her smile widening just a little. "You have a good form, strong, confident." Her words sent a surge of heat through me, and for a moment, I did not know what to say. She was standing so close now, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of chlorine on her skin, mixed with something else, something sweet, intoxicating. "Thanks," I managed, my voice sounding a little rough. You are really good too. I mean, I have been watching you swim and you are amazing." Rebecca raised an eyebrow, amused by my awkwardness. "You have been watching me, huh?" Shit. I had not meant to say that. I mean, not like that, just, you are really good." Her smile turned into something more, something almost predatory, like she had just found something she liked. "Well, I appreciate the compliment," she said, her voice dropping just a little, enough to send a shiver down my spine. After that, something changed between us. What had started as casual conversation quickly turned into something more, something charged with an unspoken tension. Every time Rebecca came to the pool, we would talk, at first just about swimming, fitness, the usual small talk. But each time the conversations grew longer, and I found myself looking forward to seeing her, craving those moments we shared. One evening, the pool was nearly empty. It was just me, closing up after my shift, and Rebecca, finishing her usual routine. The lights were dimmed, the water reflecting soft ripples across the walls, and the air felt heavy, thick with anticipation. Rebecca swam her final lap, her body cutting through the water like it was made for her. I stood there, towel in hand, waiting for her to finish, my heart pounding in my chest. She climbed out of the pool, her wet swimsuit clinging to her body, accentuating every curve. I could not take my eyes off her. She knew it too. As she walked toward me, water dripping down her legs, she met my gaze with a look that sent a jolt of electricity through me. "You are still here," she said, her voice low, almost teasing. "Yeah," I replied, my throat suddenly dry. "Just making sure everything is in order." She stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from her skin. "Is that all you are doing?" she asked, her tone playful, but with an edge that made my pulse race. I swallowed hard, my eyes flicking down to where her swimsuit clung to her body, the fabric wet and tight, leaving little to the imagination. "No," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca smiled, her eyes darkening with something I had not seen before, something hungry. She reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against my arm, sending a shiver up my spine. "You have been watching me for weeks, Jake," she murmured, her voice soft but intense. "And I have been watching you too." Before I could process what was happening, she leaned in, her lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was slow, deliberate, and utterly intoxicating. My breath hitched, and I could feel my entire body respond to her touch, the heat between us building with every second. I kissed her back, my hands sliding around her waist, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. Her body pressed against mine, her wet skin slick against my clothes, and I felt like I was losing control, like I was falling into something I could not stop, and I did not want to stop. We moved together, almost instinctively, our bodies finding each other in the dim light of the pool. Rebecca's hands roamed over my chest, my shoulders, exploring me with a kind of urgency that made my head spin. I could feel her fingers slip under the hem of my shirt, her touch searing against my skin, and I let out a soft groan as she pushed me back against the wall. Her lips left mine, trailing hot, breathless kisses down my neck, my chest, as her hands slid lower, her fingers tracing the waistband of my shorts. I gasped, my breath coming in ragged bursts as she moved against me, her touch both gentle and demanding. "Rebecca," I whispered, my voice shaky, filled with a mix of desire and disbelief. This is insane." She looked up at me, her eyes burning with the same intensity I felt coursing through my veins. "Do you want me to stop?" she asked, her voice a husky whisper. I shook my head, my heart pounding in my chest. "Number God, no." That was all she needed to hear. With a sly smile, she pulled me closer, her lips crashing against mine in a kiss that was hot, desperate, filled with all the tension that had been building between us for weeks. My hands slid down her back, feeling the smooth curve of her body under my palms as we moved together, lost in the heat of the moment. We stumbled into the locker room, the cool tiles under our feet a stark contrast to the heat between us. My hands were shaking as I tugged at her swimsuit, pulling it down over her shoulders, revealing the soft, pale skin underneath. She gasped as I kissed her neck, her collarbone, my lips trailing down her body as her hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer. I pressed her back against the lockers, my lips never leaving her skin, and I could feel her body respond to every touch, every kiss. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, and the sound of it sent a surge of desire through me that I could not ignore. "God, Jake," she moaned, her voice thick with need as her hands roamed over my body, pulling me closer. Her breathless moan sent shivers down my spine, making me want her even more. I could feel her fingers digging into my skin, her nails leaving faint marks as she wrapped her arms around my neck, pulling me into another deep, hungry kiss. It was as though all the weeks of tension between us were finally being released, and neither of us wanted to hold back anymore. I slid my hands down her sides, feeling the curve of her hips as I pressed her harder against the cold, metal lockers. She gasped against my lips, and I could feel her body shudder as I let my hands explore her, sliding down to her thighs. She wrapped her leg around me, drawing me closer, making sure there was no space left between us. Her body was warm and slick from the pool, and the sensation of her skin against mine was driving me wild. "Jake," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper, but the need in it was undeniable. She looked into my eyes, her pupils wide, her expression filled with raw, unfiltered desire. I have wanted this for so long. I could barely think straight. The only thing I could focus on was her touch, her scent, the way her body responded to mine. "Me too," I managed to say, my voice hoarse. I pulled her in tighter, my hands exploring her every inch, mapping out her body in a way that felt both intimate and urgent. Every touch seemed to ignite something inside both of us, an electric charge that kept building with every second. Her lips moved against my skin, kissing down my neck, her breath warm and tantalizing as she trailed kisses lower and lower. I could barely contain the fire she was stoking inside me. The tension between us had been simmering for weeks, and now that it had finally ignited, there was no turning back. She whispered my name again, softly, her voice sending a thrill through my entire body as I moved my hands over her, feeling her respond to my every touch. The sounds she made, the soft gasps, the moans that escaped her lips, were driving me over the edge. I kissed her again, harder this time, as she pulled me closer still, her fingers clutching at me, her body pressed against mine in a way that made it clear neither of us was thinking about anything else but the moment we were in. We shifted, our bodies moving together as though we had done this 1,000 times before. The locker room was quiet except for the sounds of our breathing, the soft echo of our bodies moving against one another. There was a rawness to it, an intensity that felt almost overwhelming. I wanted to take my time, to savor every second, but the heat between us was impossible to resist. I kissed her deeply, feeling her melt into me, her hands trailing down my back, gripping me tighter. I could feel her pulse racing under my fingers, her body trembling with the same desperate need that was consuming me. Her skin was soft and warm under my hands, and as I explored her, I felt every shiver, every tremble in response to my touch. "God, Rebecca," I whispered, pressing my forehead against hers as our breathing mingled, hot and ragged. "I cannot believe this is happening." She smiled, that same teasing, confident smile I had seen when we first met. "Believe it," she whispered back, her voice low and seductive, as her fingers traced a line down my chest. "I have wanted this just as much as you." Her words sent another wave of heat coursing through me, and before I knew it, we were moving together, our bodies responding instinctively like we had been waiting for this moment for far too long. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, just pure, unfiltered desire. The feel of her against me, her body responding to mine with every touch, every kiss. It was intoxicating. I wanted to keep going, to lose myself in her completely. Her breath hitched as I moved my hands over her, and I could feel her shudder as she gripped me tighter, pulling me impossibly closer. The sound of her name on my lips seemed to drive her wild, and she kissed me again, harder, more passionately than before. Her hands moved down my chest, exploring my body with the same intensity I had for her. We were lost in the moment, completely consumed by each other, as if the rest of the world had disappeared. It was just us, locked in this fiery embrace, our bodies moving together with an urgency that neither of us could control. We stumbled back into the corner of the locker room, her back pressing against the cool tiles as my hands roamed her body. Every touch felt electric, every kiss sending another jolt of desire through me. I could feel her breath quicken as we moved together, her body arching against mine with every movement. Her voice, soft but needy, echoed in the quiet space, urging me on. "Jake, I want you." The way she said it, with such raw emotion and hunger, made me want her even more. I pressed my lips to her neck, tasting the salt of her skin as my hands traveled down, exploring the curves of her body. She gasped, her fingers clutching at my shoulders, pulling me closer, needing me just as much as I needed her. Our bodies moved together, completely in sync, as if we had been waiting for this moment our entire lives. The locker room around us felt distant, like we had created our own private world. where nothing else mattered but the heat between us. I could feel her pulse racing beneath my lips as I kissed her, her breath coming in short, desperate bursts as we got lost in each other. "Jake," she moaned, her voice trembling as her body responded to my every touch, her hands exploring my body with the same intensity. "I cannot stop." Her words spurred me on, and I could feel the tension between us building, growing stronger with every second. I pressed her harder against the wall, my hands gripping her thighs, pulling her closer, feeling her body tremble beneath my touch. Every moment was hotter, more intense than the last. The sounds of our passion filled the small space, mixing with the soft echoes of the pool outside. We were completely wrapped up in each other. Nothing else mattered but the way we felt, the way we moved, the way we were connected. It was like time had stopped, and all that existed was her and me, our bodies intertwined, our hearts racing in unison. There was no hesitation, no doubt, just pure, unfiltered desire coursing through every inch of us. I kissed her again, deeper this time, feeling the warmth of her body against mine as we both gave in to the moment. The intensity of it all was overwhelming, and I could feel the heat between us building to a fever pitch. Everything around us blurred into the background, and all that mattered was the way we moved, the way we touched, the way we made each other feel. Her moans grew louder, more urgent, as I pressed her tighter against the wall, our bodies locked in a rhythm that felt primal, unstoppable. I could feel her nails digging into my back, her body trembling with every movement as we reached the peak of our desire. The locker room echoed with the sounds of our passion, and as we finally let go, I felt an incredible rush of emotion, a mix of relief, satisfaction, and an undeniable connection that I had never felt before. We stayed there for a moment, catching our breath, our bodies still entwined, her head resting against my chest as we came down from the high of what had just happened. The air was thick with the lingering heat of our encounter, and I could feel the cool tiles against my back as I held her close, our hearts still pounding in unison. For a while, neither of us said anything. We just stayed there, lost in the afterglow, our bodies still pressed together, the heat between us slowly fading into something calmer, more intimate. Finally, Rebecca looked up at me, a soft, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "That was—" she began, but trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. "Yeah," I agreed, still trying to wrap my head around everything that had just happened. "That was incredible." She laughed softly, her fingers tracing small circles on my chest. "I did not expect that. But I am glad it happened." I nodded, unable to do anything but agree. Everything had changed between us, and there was no going back. I had no idea what would come next, but in that moment, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the connection we had found, the undeniable heat that had brought us together, and the way it had made us feel alive. For the next few weeks, our encounters became more frequent, more intense. Every stolen moment felt like it was charged with electricity, and every touch seemed to ignite a fire that neither of us could put out. We met whenever we could, sneaking off to the locker room or the far corners of the gym, always seeking out the next moment where we could lose ourselves in each other again. It was wild, exhilarating, and unlike anything I had ever experienced. But even as we kept pushing the boundaries, I could feel a weight building in the back of my mind, a nagging sense that this could not last forever. One night, after another intense encounter in the locker room, we lay together on the cool tile floor, our bodies still tangled, the heat of our passion slowly fading. I looked over at Rebecca, her face flushed, her breathing still ragged, and I could not shake the feeling that our time together was fleeting. "We cannot keep doing this forever, can we?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper as the words hung in the air between us. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, still catching her breath as she lay beside me, her head resting against my chest. I could feel the gentle rise and fall of her body against mine, the warmth of her skin still lingering from the intensity of what we had just shared. She finally tilted her head up to look at me, her eyes soft but serious. "I know," she said softly, her voice tinged with a kind of sadness I had not expected. "But I do not want to think about that right now." I nodded, understanding. Neither of us wanted to face the reality that this, whatever this was, could not last. There were so many reasons why it should not work. The age difference, the secrecy, the fact that we came from such different stages in life. But none of that mattered when we were together, when we were lost in the heat and the passion that had brought us together. Still, that nagging feeling in the back of my mind would not go away. I knew that eventually, we would have to confront it, figure out where this was going, if anywhere at all. But for now, I was content to live in the moment, to enjoy the fire between us for as long as it would burn. We spent the next few weeks stealing moments whenever we could. Whether it was a quick rendezvous in the locker room after the gym had closed, or an impromptu meeting at her place when no one else was around, we were constantly seeking each other out. Every touch, every kiss, every heated encounter only intensified what was between us, and it became harder and harder to think about anything else. There was one night in particular that I will never forget. The gym was closed for maintenance, so we had no place to meet as we usually did. Rebecca suggested we go back to her place. I had never been to her house before, and the idea of stepping into her world, outside of the gym, felt exciting in a way that was different from anything else we had done. Her house was a quiet, cozy place on the outskirts of town, surrounded by trees and set back from the road. It was the kind of house that felt lived in, comfortable, with an air of timeless elegance. As I stepped inside, I could feel the warmth of her presence everywhere. The soft lighting, the scent of lavender lingering in the air, the old wooden furniture that gave the place a sense of history. She led me to the living room, where a fire crackled softly in the fireplace, casting a warm, flickering glow across the room. It was intimate, quiet, and so different from the locker rooms or corners of the gym where we had spent most of our time together. Here, everything felt slower, more deliberate. Rebecca sat down on the couch, motioning for me to join her. I sat beside her, feeling the heat of the fire on my skin and the tension between us building again, though this time it felt different. Less urgent, more meaningful. She turned to face me, her expression softer than I had ever seen it, her eyes filled with something I could not quite place. "We never really talk about it, do we?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. I knew what she meant. We had spent so much time caught up in the physical intensity of what we shared that we had never really stopped to talk about what it all meant. But now, sitting here in her home, away from the heat of the gym and the rush of passion, the question hung in the air between us. "I guess we have been avoiding it," I admitted, my voice equally soft. She nodded, her fingers lightly tracing patterns on the fabric of the couch as she thought. "It is not that I regret anything," she said after a moment. "I do not. But this, whatever this is, it is complicated, Jake." "I know," I said, my heart tightening a little as I thought about what she was saying. "But it does not change how I feel when I am with you." Her lips curled into a small, sad smile. "You are young. You have your whole life ahead of you. This thing between us, it is incredible, but it is not sustainable. We are at such different places in our lives." I reached out, taking her hand in mine, feeling the softness of her skin against my palm. "I do not care about that," I said, my voice more certain than I had expected. "Age, where we are in life, none of that matters when I am with you. I do not know what this is, but I know I do not want it to end." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of warmth and sadness. "But it will end, Jake. You know that, right? Eventually, this will catch up to us. It has to." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over me. I knew she was right. We could not keep this up forever. But the thought of losing what we had, the connection, the heat, the passion, felt unbearable. "Maybe," I said after a long pause, "but for now, I do not want to think about that. I just want to be here, with you." Rebecca looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, without another word, she leaned in, her lips finding mine, in a kiss that was slow and tender, but filled with the same intensity that had always been between us. It was not rushed or desperate like it had been before. This time, it felt different, deeper, more meaningful, as though we were savoring every second, knowing that it might not last forever. The kiss deepened, and soon we were tangled together on the couch, the soft glow of the fire illuminating our bodies as we moved against each other. Her hands slid down my chest, her touch deliberate and slow, sending shivers through me as she explored every inch of my skin. I could feel the heat between us building again, but this time it was slower, more controlled, like we were savoring the moment rather than rushing into it. I kissed her neck, her collarbone, trailing soft, lingering kisses down her body as she let out a soft sigh, her fingers tangling in my hair. The warmth of the fire, the softness of the couch, the feel of her body pressed against mine. It was all so different from the frantic encounters we had shared in the locker room. Here, it felt intimate, personal, like we were truly connecting in a way that went beyond just physical desire. Her breath hitched as my hands explored her, her body responding to every touch, every kiss, in a way that made my heart race. She was beautiful, confident, and in that moment, I could not imagine being anywhere else but here, with her. "Jake," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion as her hands slid down my back, pulling me closer. "I do not want this to end." I kissed her again, slow and deliberate, my hands moving over her body as we lost ourselves in the heat of the moment. The sound of the fire crackling in the background, the softness of her skin, the warmth of her breath against my neck. It all felt so perfect, so right. We moved together slowly, savoring every second, every touch, every kiss. It was not just about the physical connection this time, it was about something deeper, something that had been building between us for weeks. And as we moved together, it felt like we were finally giving in to all of the emotions we had been holding back. The night stretched on, the fire casting long shadows across the room as we lost ourselves in each other. There was no rush, no urgency, just the two of us, wrapped up in the heat and the intimacy of the moment, knowing that it might not last forever but determined to savor it while we could. Afterward, we lay together on the couch, the fire now just glowing embers in the hearth, our bodies still tangled, our breathing slow and steady. I held her close, my arm wrapped around her as she rested her head on my chest, and for a long time, we just lay there in silence, listening to the quiet sounds of the night outside. "I know we cannot keep doing this," Rebecca said quietly, her voice breaking the silence. "But I do not want to stop." "Neither do I replied, my heart tightening in my chest as I thought about what the future might hold. And in that moment, as we lay together in the dim light of the fire, I knew that whatever happened next, whatever challenges or complications we might face, I would never forget this. The connection, the passion, the heat between us, it was something I would carry with me forever.